Hey YouTube, been gardening all morning. It's just started raining, so I'm sat in this shed waiting for the rain to stop. Thought I'd do a little video. I just thought I'd show you a cheap and easy way to make a wet palette. If any of you guys don't know what a wet palette is, it's something you can use with acrylic paints to keep your paints wet and stop them drying out on the palette. And the good thing about it is at the end of a session, just shut the lid, come back the next night, open the lid up again, your paint should still be wet. So that's the way I was working last night. You can see all the paints are still wet on there. You need to put a little bit of water on your brush, stir them up again, and they'll be fine to use again. But just to show you how I made this cheap, easy one. Just you need some sort of airtight container, and I mean any airtight container would do. But this is great. This one, it's because it's small, low profile. You know, instead of dipping your brush into some sort of big sandwich box or something, you can get these easily. If you go to a pound shop, dollar shop, or whatever part of the world you're in, you can usually, in the tool section, get these boxes, and they come with a little set of hobby knives in for £1. You know, and weird and wondrous shapes of blades or whatever. I've seen these as well with needle files and that in them. And you know, not only do you get a container, you get a cheap hobby knife or some cheap files. Get yourself some of these. Get these any supermarket. These are just those spongy dishcloths, and they actually fit perfectly almost in one of these. You know, so they're only about £1 for those as well. And then you just need to get yourself some greaseproof baking powder, baking paper, like that. Cut your squares up to the size. I suggest when you cut your paper, just cut it slightly smaller than the sponge, because I've done it before, if you cut it bigger than the sponge, it dries up at the edges and then the whole thing starts to curl up and come away from the sponge. But if you cut it slightly smaller than from the sponge, it works great. Also, you need to wet the sponge, get as much water in the sponge as you can and keep that wet, and then obviously it works great for paints. I mean, the whole thing for about £3, and you have enough to, with a roll of baking paper, you'll have enough to keep you going for years. But these things, you can get them from Winsor and Newton and Dowler and Rowney, and I think P3 do one. Well, they all want about 15-20 for them. I mean, to be honest, to make one yourself for next to nothing, and spend the extra money on a nice new blister or something. So I thought that's just a little handy, just a little tip. Very cheap, very handy, very useful. Great for keeping your paints. I don't use this for washes, or if you're dry brushing, it's not worth using this. Just use an old tile or whatever palette you got. I use these things a lot. I think I've got these dozen of these for £1.30 off eBay delivered. They come from Hong Kong, took about 6 weeks to get here, but for £1.30 you can't complain. Handy little things, easily clean. I just put them in the sink, bit of hot water on them, all the paint comes straight off them. So yeah, that's it really. Just thought it was a little tip, something to do while I wait for the rain to stop. I'll give you a little update while I'm here. I'm still working on these Germans here. I've got to do some work on getting the bases ready. I'll have to go back in when I've mounted them and touch up around the bases, but getting there. So I'll show you some of these. Shit, it's making me on. So all I've got left on, get it to focus. There you go. I've just been on these. All I've got left really to do on these is just finish the skin tones on them. But the rest is pretty much, I think, all done. This is one with a camouflage jacket. I don't know how well it's coming out. So, in a nutshell, so I've primed these ready, but I'm not going to start these until I finish this Flames of War project. But you'll see the detail on these a bit better now. Where's that pirate? There it is. All ready for painting. See? Yeah, I'll call that. That's it. Just a quick one. I'm sat here bored. Alright, cheers.